Men forget the death of their father more quickly than the loss of their wealth. Machiavelli. Have you ever placed your trust in someone and been betrayed? Have you ever wondered why, even when surrounded by people, you always feel alone? Have you ever noticed that in the darkest hours, even the sweetest voices become haunting voices? Machiavelli's words in the sentence quoted at the beginning were not said in an exaggerated way. They were whispered with the precision of someone who understood something that few can bear. In the game of power, friendship is just a mask and trust, an invitation to death. We live trapped in a comfortable illusion, and in the illusion that emotional bonds are unbreakable, that the people around us share the same loyalty that we offer. But what if this is nothing more than a convenient fantasy? What if behind the hugs there are calculations? What if generosity is just a strategic move? This is where Machiavelli's brutal honesty reveals itself as an uncomfortable mirror. Not to make us hate the world, but to finally learn to see it as it is. This video is a dive into the hidden layers of human psychology, where the true nature of social relations mixes with ambition, manipulation, and survival instinct. We will explore the thinking of Niccolò Machiavelli, not as the Machiavellian villain that popular culture has painted him as, but as the surgical realist who tore away the veils of naivety. You will understand why, on the chessboard of power, feelings are tokens, not guarantees. You will see how the game is played behind the scenes of decisions, alliances, and supposed friendships. We will cross the gates of the prince and discover what really happens when idealism meets raw power. Brace yourself. This will not be a comfortable ride. It will be a journey for those who dare to face the world as it is, and not as they would like it to be. And when this crossing is over, you will be able to see clearly who is really on your side, and who is just waiting for the right moment to pull the strings. To understand why Machiavelli warns us that no one is truly your friend in the game of power, we need to go back to 15th century Florence, a bustling city-state, the scene of conspiracies, betrayals, and disputes between influential families, such as the Medici, the Sforza, and the Borgia. It was a time when alliances were sealed in blood and trust often led to ruin. It was in this volatile and cruel environment that Niccolò Machiavelli lived, observed, and with surgical precision, exposed the hidden mechanisms of power in his most famous book, The Prince. Unlike the idealists of his time who still clung to the values of chivalric honor, Machiavelli dared to do something dangerous. He told the naked truth. For him, rulers and authority figures could not afford to govern with naivety. Those who believed too much in the words of others were, in practice, signing their own death warrant. In his view, power is not kind, it is ruthless, and its maintenance requires cunning, coldness, and strategy. Friendship in this context is rarely more than a temporary alliance, useful until the point at which it ceases to serve. But Machiavelli's thought is not limited to politics. It is, in essence, a profound reflection on human nature. In a world where self-preservation is the primary law, affection can turn into manipulation, and loyalty into currency. Trust, for Machiavelli, must be measured, weighed, and whenever possible tested. For where there is interest, there is play, and where there is play, there is risk. This vision made him hated by many, misunderstood by others, and, for a few, a master of bitter but necessary wisdom. It is no coincidence that his teachings have spanned centuries, influencing leaders, strategists, and scholars of the human mind. He offers us a map of a dark territory, not so that we can get lost in it, but so that we know where we are stepping. It is important to emphasize that Machiavelli did not encourage gratuitous cruelty, nor did he preach absolute cynicism. What he proposed was an implacable lucidity. If you want to maintain your freedom, your integrity, and your space of influence, you need to understand that the world is not governed by pure intentions, and that, in the game of power, the most dangerous mistake is to believe that everyone plays fair. Within esoteric traditions and schools of ancient wisdom, this same principle appears in other guises, that of vigilance over one's own bonds. The Hermeticists, for example, taught that the initiated should remain silent and observe more than speak, because it is in emotional imbalance that the manipulator finds his opening. Zen warned about the illusion of social bonds as a form of distraction from the true path. With Machiavelli, this wisdom becomes politics, strategy, and emotional self-defense. What he tells us even today is that the game has not changed. It has just changed clothes. And if you are not aware of it, you will be swallowed by it. At the heart of Machiavelli's work lies an uncomfortable but powerful revelation. Human nature is volatile, opportunistic, and often contradictory. Man, he said, is ungrateful, deceitful, cowardly in the face of danger, and greedy for profit, not because he is inherently evil, but because survival, not virtue, is the strongest impulse that moves him. With this stark lens, Machiavelli does not invite us to paranoia, but to awareness. He forces us to abandon innocence and see human relationships for what they really are: fragile contracts, constantly renegotiated behind the scenes for convenience. Friendship on this board is just another piece. It can be genuine, yes, but it can also be circumstantial, strategic, based on invisible exchanges that fall apart as soon as the balance of power changes. That is why, in the game of power, to trust blindly is to walk blindfolded amid swords. The true prince, the true player of the world, knows that every smile can hide a knife. He observes more than he speaks, tests more than he promises, and maintains control not through love, but through perception. But what did Machiavelli mean by power? It is not just about thrones or crowns, but the ability to shape the world around you, to influence people, to maintain your own autonomy in a sea of conflicting wills. Power is what separates what you want from what you get. And to achieve or preserve it, it is not enough to be good, you have to be skillful. You have to know when to keep quiet, when to retreat, when to act forcefully, and when to don the mask of kindness. Machiavelli knew that even virtue in the real world needs disguise. One of the most fundamental concepts to understand his philosophy is that of virtù, which has nothing to do with moral virtue, but with skill, strategic intelligence, and the courage to make difficult decisions. Virtù is the ability to act with surgical precision in the face of change. It is the steady hand in times of chaos, the eye that sees through the fog of empty speeches. It is what separates the ruler from the ruled, the creator of reality from its prisoner. And here, Machiavelli is brutally honest. Those who possess virtù do not wait for ideal conditions, they shape them. The other crucial concept is that of fortune, not in the sense of wealth, but as chance, destiny, the unpredictable chaos of life. Fortune, according to him, is like a wild river. It can destroy, flood, sweep away everything it encounters. But those who build defenses, who prepare themselves, who understand the cycles, can channel this force to their advantage. Machiavelli recognizes that we do not have total control over life, but insists that we can control it enough if we are smart, attentive, and immune to illusion. And here comes the most delicate point. To play this game, we must give up naivety. Machiavelli did not look kindly on those who act based solely on absolute ethical principles. Not because he despised morality, but because he knew that the real world rarely rewards purity. In a minefield of interests and ambitions, those who refuse to get their hands dirty end up being manipulated by those who already have blood on their fingers. A good ruler, a good strategist in life, must know when to be a lion and when to be a fox. Strength and cunning, courage and deceit, love and fear, nothing is fixed. Everything depends on the moment. This brings us to the sentence that opens this video. Men forget the death of their father more quickly than the loss of their patrimony. This is not just a provocation. It is an X-ray of the human soul. Machiavelli is saying that emotions do not shape behavior as much as interests. That the loss of what we consider ours, status, power, influence, resources, hurts more deeply than any symbolic mourning. Therefore, in the game of power, threatening someone's assets is touching the most exposed nerve in their psyche. He did not say this with gratuitous coldness, but as someone who saw, with his own eyes, the cruel gears of politics in motion. Expelled, betrayed, persecuted, Machiavelli learned the hard way that trusting too much is a risk that few can afford to take. And that is why his voice still echoes, because he speaks to those who are tired of being pawns and want to finally understand the game. This understanding is not only for politicians, it is for everyone who lives among people, for those who have trusted too much and been disappointed, for those who feel that there is something false in the bonds that surround us, for those who want to leave behind naivety and enter into self-control. In Machiavelli's labyrinthine universe, understanding the game of power is more than knowing how to move pieces. It is understanding that the board is always changing, and that its players are often not who they appear to be. Behind every friendly smile there may be a calculation. Behind every apparent kindness, a strategy. And perhaps the most disturbing point of Machiavellian philosophy is not the revelation that people lie, but the fact that this is expected, natural, even necessary in certain positions of influence. Machiavelli did not paint human beings as inherently evil. He simply rejected romantic idealism. He knew that, when pressed, man chooses his own interest. And this radical understanding of human nature led him to create a philosophy based not on how the world should be, but on how it really is. In this, he stands out from most thinkers of his time, and from many of our own as well. While others sought formulas for universal justice, Machiavelli looked behind the scenes where decisions are made in the shadows, where morality is bent to fit the will of those who govern. However, this does not mean accepting cynicism as a way of life. On the contrary, Machiavelli's thinking invites lucidity. He shows that true power is not just about conquering, but about sustaining. And sustaining power requires more than strength. It requires reading the scene, emotional calculation, self-control, and above all, the ability to act with intention even under pressure. That is the true test. Because, as Machiavelli himself said, the prince who wishes to maintain power must learn not to be always good. This phrase, often misinterpreted, does not say that the ruler must be cruel. It says that the ruler must be free. Free from the illusion that kindness is always effective. Free from the need to please. Free from dependence on the approval of others. Because in the game of power, those who depend on the image of good to stay on their feet will inevitably be brought down by those who do not have this attachment. This is where many stumble. Because we were educated to please. Since childhood, we learn that being accepted is more important than being truthful, that maintaining harmony is better than provoking the discomfort of the truth. And so we grow up avoiding confrontation, moderating opinions, wearing masks, and losing power. Machiavelli, on the contrary, invites us to abandon this conditioning. He proposes that we face the harsh truth. Not everyone who claims to be on our side really is. Not all allies are permanent, and not every gesture of friendship is a gesture of love. He understood that power is, by nature, solitary. Those who see further walk more alone, because the higher one climbs, the more others want to see one fall. And it is in this scenario that loyalty becomes rare, and silence an armor. Machiavelli saw silence as a strategy. To him, talking too much was to give oneself away. Showing intentions too soon was to offer ammunition to the enemy. Cunning, patience, and a watchful eye then became fundamental virtues, not to manipulate the world by force, but to avoid being swallowed up by it. And perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his philosophy is this: there is no justice in the game of power. There is balance, there is strength, there is influence. But justice, in the pure sense, is almost never achieved. And those who enter the game expecting morality to guide everyone's steps will sooner or later be surprised. The world, for Machiavelli, is neither just nor unjust. It is driven by forces, and those who understand these forces govern. Those who ignore them are governed. That is why, in practice, He suggested that a good leader not only inspire fear, but also avoid contempt. Fear without hate, authority without arrogance, charisma with distance. The balance between being feared and being loved, being preferable when necessary to choose to be feared. Because the love of subjects is volatile, conditioned, and changes with the wind. Fear, on the other hand, is more predictable, more constant. Not as oppressive terror, but as calculated respect. The Machiavellian mind is not cruel. It is awakened. It realizes that human beings are driven by passions, fears, and interests, and it does not seek to erase this, but to dance with it. Lead with emotional intelligence, govern with watchful eyes, advance without deluding oneself, because in the end, as he himself said, the ends justify the means, not as an endorsement of all wickedness, but as a warning that sometimes morality needs to be put aside for a greater purpose to be fulfilled. Uncovering the inner workings of power is not just an intellectual exercise, it is a call to action. Machiavelli did not write for the weak-minded. His words, sharp as razors, were directed at those who wish to navigate the games of life with their eyes open, their feet firm, and their hearts protected. And this leads us to the inevitable question: how can we apply all this to our daily lives without falling into cynicism or paranoia? It all starts with presence. Presence is the most silent form of power. When you enter a room knowing who you are, without needing to be validated or accepted, you already begin to alter the energy around you. Machiavelli would call this natural authority, that magnetism that does not need words, because it emanates from inner conviction. And this authority is cultivated in silence, in self-knowledge, and in the conscious choice of where to place your energy. The next practice is emotional discernment. You need to observe more and react less. Every time you respond impulsively to a provocation, you give up a part of your control. Those who wish to be sovereign over themselves must master their impulses, not because repression is noble, but because reaction is predictable. And everything that is predictable can be manipulated. Choose your words with the same care as those who place stones in a foundation. In environments where power is at stake, whether at work, in family, or in social circles, talking too much is a luxury that few can afford. Learn the art of strategic silence, not as someone who fears it, but as someone who calculates it. Well-placed silence is more eloquent than 1,000 justifications. It confuses, challenges, commands respect. It protects. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, learn to identify social theater. Understand which relationships are genuine and which are based on convenience. Machiavelli was not saying that we should not have friends, but rather that in the game of power, the name friendship often masks fleeting alliances. Stay loyal to your purpose, not to the whims of those who change with the wind. Applying Machiavellian thinking does not mean becoming cold or calculating. It means living with your eyes open. It means stopping expecting the world to play fair and starting to play wisely, because in the end, those who do not know how to play will always be played. Traversing the labyrinths of Machiavelli's thought is like walking through the narrow corridors of an ancient castle. In every corner there are echoes of truths that many would rather not hear. But at the end of this journey, one thing becomes clear. In the game of power, naivety is a dangerous luxury, and lucidity a vital necessity. The phrase that opened this video, "Men forget the death of their father more quickly than the loss of their patrimony," is not just a crude observation about human nature. It is a cutting reminder that behind social masks, there are hidden desires, silent ambitions, and an invisible war for advantage, influence, and dominance. What we learn today is not just about politics or strategy. It is about emotional survival. It is about not confusing affection with alliance. It is about recognizing that even surrounded by smiles, true power lies in keeping your integrity intact, in seeing without reacting, in listening without giving in choosing precisely who deserves your presence. Machiavelli challenges us to break with the childish idealism that everyone around us wants our best. He calls us to maturity, not the kind that hardens the heart, but the kind that sharpens perception. And here is the final truth. You don't have to be cold to be strong. You don't have to manipulate to be strategic. The most feared power is that of the one who remains true to himself, even in the midst of dissimulation. The one who, instead of seeking approval, seeks clarity. The one who, instead of shouting louder, learns to talk less and observe more. The one who understands that, in the game of life, the true master move is the one that doesn't need to be seen. Therefore, take these ideas not as closed doctrines but as keys. Keys to open doors that you may have avoided for fear of seeing what's on the other side. But seeing is necessary, understanding is liberating, and choosing consciously is what separates you from those who live like pieces, from those who finally learn to move the pieces. If this message touched you in any way, write in the comments, "Now I see the game," because that is what Machiavelli offers, not a manual of coldness but a mirror of reality. And only those who face the mirror with courage are able to shape their own destiny.